And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Richard Francham, a colleague of mine when we worked together 30 years ago. Richard was pushing the envelope with new ways of learning with interdisciplinary work at that time, and I was offering Ontario's first ever multimedia course in 1990, which was based on project-based learning without a curriculum guide. And somehow I wish we could return to 1990. The dialogue yesterday and today has been excellent. Grace mentioned that it's great when an educator closes the door and then does what's right. While that's encouraging, and we do see these pockets of excellence in most schools and across the public education systems, we really do need to have all educators keep their doors open, and not just their doors, but we need them to open their classrooms to offer the world as their canvas for learning, and then they collectively will do what's right. As with any conference where critical thinking is welcomed, I'd like to challenge several notions that I've heard over the 2 days, since it really is not a zero-sum game. It's not an all or nothing contract. So I don't personally support the notion that public education does not create well-rounded individuals, since there's many examples of wonderful success stories in public education. By not recognizing the many successes, we do a disservice to those that have succeeded and are now changing the world. There's examples of creative thinkers and problem solvers and youth that are making a difference right now in our publicly funded schools, and they're not waiting until they get out of the school system. I'm a pragmatist, so to think that we can blow up the currently publicly funded school system, where we have powerful provincial unions and politically elected officials as the architects and funders, is too utopian for me personally. So I choose to look at what I can do within the limitations I have to work within. The wisdom is in recognizing what we can control and what we can't, and knowing that the individual experiences are all valid, as we've heard over the last 2 days, but they may not represent another user's experience. I'd also challenge the myth I heard about teachers leaving the public school system, at least in Ontario, as we've had almost no loss of teachers once they enter the profession. However, the reason I have an interest in this conference and I advocate for school reform is if we go back to the start of the conference and we heard words from June Gervin. When we add an equity lens to the discussion, we find that our school public system is not meeting the needs of all students, whether they're marginalized due to poverty, or they're racialized youth, or they have different learning styles, or they're students that have been oppressed in the current system. There really is a need for change. So I believe personally in the philosophy of Sir Ken, and when he advocated that every student can succeed and every student has a gift inside them waiting to be unleashed, because I share that belief, I do think our public education system needs to reform, find ways to be more flexible, have more options, and have new ways of assessing within every school and every board. In our school system, we have personalized learning program that supports students in one class or two classes without bells and flexible curriculum. They focus the afternoon on life, not curriculum. We have a program for pregnant teens. We have a program for homeless youth. We have a program for students that have dropped out, and while they were close to graduating, they didn't attain that goal. And we have a program for youth that are involved in the criminal youth justice system. So these are important programs because each student deserves an education, and they need these programs to meet with success. But what's always puzzled me in my 30 years in public education is that students that were not successful in our traditional classes meet with success in these programs, and they thrive when they learn in these safe spaces, not based on traditional courses, not organized by birth dates and confined by bells. In terms of homeschooling, we're not seeing thousands of students leaving public education, even during COVID. In a board of 45,000 students, we had 271 move to homeschooling. So 99.4% of all of our students are remaining in our traditional school system. But I envision a system that supports those students that are choosing homeschooling, one that supports the students who want to learn at school, and a new system where students learn in hybrid and flexible models, both in person, at home, and online. My goal would be to look at how we can support all the diverse needs of students through more options, more flexibility, and looking how reform of the current system would benefit everyone, including involving our communities to be more part of each neighborhood school. That system would involve learning outdoors, learning from others, teaching others, and using technology in ways that allow students to connect and learn, but not ways that they did without technology. So not taking a worksheet and creating an electronic worksheet is a quick example. My personal interest is how to reform public education to scale, not to focus solely on unschooling with charter-like schools or private schools that may end up unintentionally increasing the equity gap for those that don't have the family resources to unlearn on their own and need to send their children to their locally public funded school. So now you know my bias and my lens that I'm bringing to this introduction, and that may have shaped some of Alison as a member of the school board that we work together in. To do this in Ottawa Catholic, our attempt at reform, we're using Dr. Michael Fullen's deep learning framework. It connects us to 1,500 schools across 10 countries. And that's what our next speaker will focus on. This framework looks at global competencies as a key outcome, not a side benefit of education. And it looks at student passion and allowing time for this passion, not solely surface learning. It's learning that sticks, not learning that is memorized for a mark and then forgotten. And it's learning that makes a difference to change the world, whether that's locally or globally, based on students' interest now in each grade. Last week, I had the privilege of presenting to the International Development Bank at their Latin American and Caribbean Education Summit. It was disheartening to hear that 20 of the 26 countries have not had students return to school since COVID last March. They now have millions of students not attending school in person or being educated at home. These will become dropouts at a time when the economy has also crashed. The encouraging part of the 3 days of dialogue with the ministers of education from these countries was that they all share an appetite for reform. They want to return to school in ways they didn't have before COVID, a new vision for education, and that's encouraging. The focus is on social and emotional learning and addressing the inequities that came up in all of the discussions about education, and we share that here in Ottawa. So your next speaker is Alison Kinahan. She's the coordinator of leading and learning in the Ottawa Catholic School Board. She's one of the co-leads for deep learning, also a strong advocate and a leader for equity. Most recently, she's moved her focus for professional learning to look at anti-Black racism and unconscious bias. Alison sits in a unique position in our board because she works with the Faculty of Education, preparing new teachers, and then she works with the new teachers when they start in our board through NTIP, New Teacher Induction Program. She works with Leading and Learning to run equity, leadership, and coaching programs. And through these programs, I believe we're reforming public education. So thanks, Alison, for your experiences and sharing your expertise with those that were able to join today and to critically listen to our perspectives.